and welcome to the Moving Forward Talk Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Collins, along with my friends, Kristi and Emily. As we always do in our talk show, this week we are going to demonstrate that life goes on and healing happens if you just keep moving forward. And our topic this week is very timely because we're going to be talking about the holidays, just like my friend Santa back here with the poinsettias coming out of the top of him. A little disturbing if you think about it too hard. But nonetheless, when I was growing up, we would have avoided that poinsettia, even though it was the cheapest one they had at Walmart. We would have looked for one that had a plain wrapping paper that didn't have a Santa belt on it, because my dad always called Santa Claus the big lie. So that kind of gives you a flavor for what Christmas was like growing up at my house. And I'm interested to see what... I know Kristi did not grow up in this belief system, so I'd love to hear what it was like for you, Kristi, growing up, just in a mainstream Christian house with Christmas.
Sure. So I think Christmas was always a time of magic. It doesn't take long. I don't know if it was me or if it's most kids, but I think I was probably about 6 or 7 when I first realized that Santa wasn't real and that this was all just like a big game that was played at the time. But of course, it was way more fun to just play along. So that my dad was always doing crazy things to encourage the belief in Santa. So Santa would always leave a mess when he would come. We set out cookies and milk. And I knew it was my dad, like for most of my childhood. Like I knew it wasn't real. But it was just fun. There was one year where Santa was it was pretty clear to my dad, I think, that we weren't believing in Santa anymore. And so he had my grandfather call us and pretend to be Santa on the phone. So just like silly stuff. We would get faxes from the North Pole. It's kind of aging myself and telling you how old I am, but we would get faxes from the North Pole, like on North Pole letterhead. And I knew it was like my grandfather sending it. Like even as a kid when it was happening, I knew it was like a game, but it was just fun. So I had all of the Santa stuff. So I know that you guys are, going to talk about how Santa was evil. I know all about that. I was there in the cult as an adult and kind of got indoctrinated that way. So I get it, but for me, it wasn't like that. It was just this fun thing that happened. And it was just a game that we were all kind of in on. But Christmas was always a time of magic. We would go see Christmas lights. My dad, a couple of different times, decorated our house on the exterior, which was always really nice. We always had a Christmas tree, a train around the tree, lots of presents on Christmas morning. We had traditions of things that we would cook on Christmas and for Christmas. My parents didn't like to do the big turkey again. They said it's too close together to have a turkey and ham like Thanksgiving and Christmas. So my mom used to always do like this table of yummy stuff we could eat all day. So we'd have sausage balls and cocktail wieners and those kind of things, and this all the sweets. So yeah, at church it was nice too. They had we had this giant Christmas tree in the church that we would all help decorate, and the kids would make ornaments. In the Methodist tradition, they make what's called chrismons, which are basically symbols from Christ's life. And I remember as a kid making them, and we got to come up with our own symbols. And some of them were kind of questionable, but the kids had a rationale. But we got to make them and put them on the Christmas tree. That was always very special. So just different things like that. Coming into the message as a teenager, all of that changed pretty dramatically, though I suspect not as dramatically as some of y'all's experiences growing up in it.
So it's interesting you talk about, Santa. That was so funny because we would go to my grandparents' house. My grandparents were not part of our high control group. And so my grandparents' house was just I don't know, paradise. So we would go to my grandparents' house. They had a live Christmas tree. It was decorated to the nines. My favorite ornaments were a nativity scene that my youngest aunt had painted. They were so beautiful. And they were hanging in the branches of the tree. And then my grandpa would go outside and jingle sleigh bells. And we all laughed because we were told that Santa didn't exist. And it was a myth and a legend. And that it was wrong for people to pretend that Santa was real. But we just kind of laughed at it because Grandpa was so awesome. And then when I moved to Jeffersonville, Indiana, my husband's first cousins were younger, and like they're a little bit older than my children are. And it was great fun, and all of the family thought it was hilarious that these young girls would say to adults who asked them what they were going to ask Santa for Christmas, they would say, "As big as you are, don't you know that Santa's not real?" And just be super rude to these people in the stores. Even as a person who was part of that high control group, I didn't buy into that. I thought that was so weird. They were encouraging these young girls to be rude to the adults who were trying to be kind to them in the stores. I just thought that was beyond ridiculous. So I don't know. That just kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor of what my upbringing was like. Of course, there's the Amish twist because I did go to Amish school, so there was a lot of Amish Christmas programs with poems recited and Christmas carols sung, all by kerosene lamplight and with an outhouse out back. But it was a lot of fun, and we had a gift exchange and lots of cookies and candy. But we certainly did not participate in mainstream culture around Christmas at all. Now, the fun part, though, we did get to go riding around looking for Christmas lights, and we would pick a favorite light. Like my favorite might have been blue, so I would have been looking for all the blue lights and counting them up, and then someone else would have chosen multicolor, and someone else would have chosen white, and we would see kind of keep score whose favorite was the most prevalent that year. So that was kind of fun. But anyway, that's just kind of what my childhood was like. We did not have a Christmas tree in our home, but we were allowed to participate with one when we went over to our grandparents. And we were the only children on both sides at that time. I did end up having younger cousins later, but when I was growing up, there were no children except for my brothers and me, and on both sides of the family. So we were very spoiled rotten in a great way. I remember one Christmas, my birthday is at Christmas too. My birthday is December 21st. It's actually the shortest day of the year. It's the winter solstice. And so a lot of times in December, when I was a little girl, I couldn't even sleep just for excitement because it was my birthday. It was Christmas. There were presents. It was so awesome. But I remember that one year I had asked for Baby Alive, I think. I think I got Baby Alive at my birthday. And then I also got an Easy Bake Oven at Christmas. And at the same time, I think our uncle gave us Big Wheel Hot Wheels toys. And we rode them around in the house. That is like my favorite memory of growing up, is riding around Big Wheel toys inside my grandma's house on Christmas morning. But it just felt over the top wonderful. Kind of like, I don't know, the Nutcracker Suite. If you think about what Clara would have felt like when she got the Nutcracker and they had that great feast that they have in the Nutcracker Suite, which, by the way, was my favorite record. There was, we had a record, and it was the Nutcracker Suite, and they had put lyrics to it. I think it was actually a Captain Kangaroo recording. I've looked it up as an adult, and I try to listen to it at Christmas time. But I mean, I just felt like I was in Wonderland, like Clara was in her dream. So anyway, I don't know. That was my Christmas growing up. I think everybody kind of has their own little feeling of Christmas from whatever they had as a child. But I think, Emily, maybe your experience was entirely different from both my experience and Kristi's. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about growing up in your high control group.
Yeah, my high control group was not about Christmas at all. Obviously, my parents both grew up in normal mainstream Christianity, so they did Christmas, and then it was just cold turkey, nothing once they left that and went into the high control group. So then on my mom's side, her and her sibling got in, and so all of my cousins were in. So it wasn't until years later that when I came out of the high control group that I gave my grandmother her very first Christmas present from a grandchild. And that was amazing. I mean, I was already in my 20s, I think, when I gave that to her. And that was just so special for her. She'd always want to do stuff, but we'd come and, make comments. She'd have a Christmas tree outside that she'd decorate as her winter tree, but she knew that she'd have nothing but backhanded comments if she actually had a Christmas tree. And I was kind of chuckling when you were talking about the Santa Claus comments. I think both of you kind of alluded. And I was the child who did not need to be encouraged, that I went around and I had to tell people that Santa Claus wasn't real. I know that I was on the farm here and the renters' kids were talking about it's probably the Easter Bunny and Santa. I think I just they're not real. And I just was so proud of the fact that I had this secret, that I knew that it was all full of crap, But then I don't remember this because I was very, very little. But it was a story that was told throughout my childhood, almost a little bit of pride when my parents would tell the story. Apparently, we were out somewhere. It was around Christmas time, and there was this older gentleman who had white hair and a white beard, and somebody was and he wasn't playing Santa Claus or anything, but someone's like, oh, saw me, that looks like Santa, yada, yada. And I said, Santa's a naughty man who lies to kids.
Wow.
And the person was kind of okay then. So I was
that's intense.
super proud of that. But yeah, I'm just no, he's a naughty man. Where's some of the other notes that I wrote? So on the other side of the family, on my dad's side, there was 7 of us cousins, or was it 7 besides me? I don't know. So there was more cousins. There was only 2 cousins on the other side, 3 grandkids. So there was more, or maybe 9 on the other side. I don't know. So we would go and we'd go to Christmas dinner there. And then you'd see the Christmas presents and you'd see your name on the presents. And then when it's about time to open the presents, you had to leave. And I actually just found out in September, sitting with a few of my cousins at the table at my grandmother's funeral. We were sitting around and somebody had asked, what some memories were. And I actually brought up the Christmas memory, and my one cousin goes, no, I thought you had to leave because you had to go do barn chores. I'm like, no, we had to leave because the evil presents were being opened and I couldn't partake in that. So it was like, here you have presents under the tree, your name is on them, and you gotta go. But then to make it really confusing to a small child, 5, 6, 7-year-old kid, you see the presents, you can't touch the presents, you gotta leave, it's evil, but 2-3 days later, grandma comes over, and you get the presents, and then you get to open the presents, so it's talk about confusing for a kid. We'll get into that later. There was some therapy behind that, and kind of a lot to work through to be able to enjoy Christmas in later years, and then I was thinking about, when I was a little bit older, because it was probably in the early 90s, mid 90s, when the Green Bay Packers were doing really good, about to go to their Super Bowl. And my favorite player was Reggie White. And I was really kind of getting into football. I'd sneak football on the radio. I learned football because Sunday afternoon my parents would take a nap and I'd go, you'd have the big radio receiver with the stack and the turntable, those giant consoles you used to have for radio, and I'd go and turn on the radio and scroll through. Couldn't listen to the music because that was evil, but I'd hear this thing, so I'd listen to football really quiet so I didn't wake my parents up. So I got into football, right? So random. But then I loved Reggie White. He's a Christian, he's this and that. He was a defensive lineman for the Packers. He used to play for the Eagles, and they called him the Minister of Defense. He was actually a pastor. And I wanted a Reggie White jersey. Well, my parents ended up getting a Jersey cow, a steer that they were going to raise for meat and then slaughter later. And my dad thought it would be hilarious to name the jersey Reggie. So I didn't have a Reggie jersey, but I had a jersey named Reggie. And he was telling everybody about this. And one of the gals that worked for one of the insurance brokerage houses that my dad worked with, we still work with them now. She felt so sorry for this poor kid. And so she actually put in our mailbox around Christmas a Christmas present for me, and I got a Reggie White jersey. So that was kind of interesting, ooh, I got a Christmas present. So yeah, Christmas was evil. You talked about the people in the other high control groups. We talked about Jeffersonville and how corrupt they were down there, that they celebrated Christmas. But yeah, Christmas was super, super taboo. We didn't go out looking at lights. You didn't listen to the music. I remember at my grandma's house, the one that did do all the Christmas, we'd listen to... One of my first Christmas music memories is Alvin and the Chipmunks on the 8-track. So you had faxes. I had listened to Christmas music on an 8-track. So anyway, Christmas was confusing and not a good memory overall in my childhood. But darn it, we were the special people. So, it made it all worth it.
So I have a couple more things I want to add to that. First of all, about Santa. So no matter how much you might want to tell your child there is no Santa, if you are a backslidden high control group member and have a television and your child sees TV, they might get other ideas, because someone told my son there was no Santa. And of course, we'd not brought him up to believe in Santa. But my oldest son, he said, Santa Claus is real. He is just as real as Superman. I have seen them both on TV. So in my sense of the world, Superman was real and Santa was real. He had seen them both on TV. So I guess if you're in a high control group and you want to stay in a high control group, be circumspect about your television watching, because Superman and Santa are both real if your child sees them on TV. But in our house, in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense, because having left the high control group, my mom also left the high control group, and she is regretful about the time we spent in the high control group. And there was obviously, looking back, some tension between my parents around the holidays. Mom was all about the presents. Mom was all about Christmas. And my dad was wishy-washy. Like around Thanksgiving, he would start reading all the Branham quotes about paganism and Christmas trees and gifts and how they were all wrong. And then I don't know if he got his Christmas bonus in the middle of December or if he just had a change of heart, but he would go on Christmas Eve and buy Christmas presents for his parents and for my mom's parents, not for us, because we were already spoiled rotten by my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. But he did relent, and there was some Christmas spending that went on. And I really don't know. I'd be interested. I'd love to be a mouse in a corner in my dad's head and know what was going on with him. Of course, he'd been raised, celebrating Christmas. And then, maybe he heard stories about Jeffersonville, where we eventually moved, where the pastor and the assistant pastor received suits or suit coats, like dressy coats to wear to funerals and things like that as Christmas presents at Christmas time. And the children got Hershey's Kisses in a candy cane, and they got a orange and all that stuff from the church, paid for by tithes and offerings. I don't know, but it's really interesting. You're right, it was confusing, and kids see through that stuff. I mean, I'm sure there are things that I'm hypocritical about, and whatever they are, I'm sure my kids see straight through it, because kids, I think, don't have a lot of patience for wishy-washiness. They don't have a lot of patience for insincerity. They don't have a lot of patience for people who say one thing and do another. So, I don't know. That's my 2 cents about that anyway. So, if any of you have anything more to say about childhood and Christmas time, we can go on with that. Or if not, we will go ahead and transition up to adulthood inside of a high control group. And I guess we could start with my experience, because I sort of, my Christmases got more jolly when I moved to Jeffersonville, Indiana. Like I said, they had Christmas presents at church. They would sometimes have a Christmas Eve service. Of course, they were just the same as every other service, except you got to sing Christmas carols instead of just Amazing Grace and Only Believe and that sort of thing. But I don't know. We were allowed to have Christmas trees. I made sure I was intentional in who I picked to marry. I picked a man who I knew would have a Christmas tree in his home, because I grew up without one and I wanted one, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with it, especially since, the prophet had one at his house. So our first Christmas in our little apartment, we had a little tiny tree on top of our little tiny table in the corner. But we had a tree every year, and we got married in November. We had a tree that December, but it was small. And then when we bought a house, I'm not sure. I think we moved into our house in the fall, and then we bought a tree like in the after Christmas sales. So we had our small tree the first year, but after that we had a nice big tree, and we decorated it every year. But we didn't have outdoor lights. I'm not sure why, because I believe that John's aunt had outdoor lights, and she was one of the most circumspect of the high control group. But I don't know, maybe it had to do with his mom's family, because my husband's mom's family was much more consistent in their beliefs than his dad's family was. There was just a lot more inconsistency on his dad's side. So maybe he kind of got that from his mom's side, because they were definitely less Christmas observing than the Jeffersonville people were. But anyway, our first time having lights was after we left the high control group. So anyway, Kristi, you had the opposite experience. You grew up and then went into a high control group, and what kind of changes did you have there, or how did you and your husband navigate Christmas as young married people?
When I first came into the high control group, I was a teenager, and when people started talking about Christmas and talking about what those nominal Christians out in the world do for Christmas, they would say things like they lie to their children, they follow all these pagan beliefs, it confuses the kids, blah, yada, yada. Well, I had been raised in that, and I knew that none of that was true. There was no point in my childhood where I felt like my parents were lying to me. It was always just a game. It was just something that we did. There was never any confusion on my part that if my parents would lie to me about Santa, maybe they're lying to me about Jesus. Like, that never crossed my mind, right? So I had this very nuanced view of what the message was saying and what William Branham was getting at with that. at least I thought it was, much more right and enlightened, having had that life experience that I had. So when he would say things like, but we do it for the kids, because there's some quotes where he talks about having a Christmas tree in his house and he does it for his kids. That's kind of how I looked at Christmas. Yes, it's not spiritually significant for Christians to believe in Santa, right? That's kind of obvious. I think he was kind of trying to play both sides of the fence there in terms of like appealing to his audience, whoever his audience happened to be and what they thought about the holidays. He wanted to kind of appeal to them. So coming at it, 50 years later, 40 years later, and trying to dissect that and figure out how we're supposed to live our lives in this 1950s, 1960s debate about Christmas traditions, it just becomes this big tangled mess. But for me, it was always more about let's focus on the meaning for the season, which is celebrating the birth of Christ, right? So when I came in, me and my husband got married, a couple of years later. We had a little Christmas tree. My husband never had one when he was growing up, but me and my husband didn't see a problem with that. We always had gifts for our kids. That was something that the group we were in our corner of the message verse, they always had Christmas trees. There was never any qualms about lights and such. Individual families would do things differently. There were a lot of message families that wouldn't have Christmas trees or do like extravagant presents. But most families, I would say, did have Christmas trees, did do presents, did all the trappings, maybe no Santa. But I don't even remember them shying away from like Santa hats. I do seem to remember like your poinsettia vase that you have back behind you, Jen, with the Santa buckle on it. Like they wouldn't have shied away from that in the group that we were in. That wouldn't have been taboo. But it was still the things that I missed the most about Christmas in the message were like the church traditions. We always had a candlelight service on Christmas Eve in the Methodist Church. It's this beautiful tradition. We sing Christmas carols at night in the church and light candles. Talk about Jesus being the light of the world coming into the world. It just, the message doesn't do any of that. There's no special services for Christmas or anything like that. And I missed that. We always had a Christmas cantata, which is like when the choir does special music. Bells, like we had a bell choir, like chorus that, played handbells. Growing up, and I missed all that kind of stuff. The message just doesn't do that kind of like special events around Christmas. But otherwise, it was fairly normal. So I know we were in the minority on that.
It sounds very similar to what I had after I moved to Jeffersonville, Indiana. And you're right, though, there wasn't the same sort of thing. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about Christmas programs, because when the homeschool group that was a Branham following homeschool group, we did try to have a Christmas program. And that might have partially been my idea, coming from the Amish tradition where they had Christmas programs in the schools. So it was just a good excuse for kids to get together and sing Christmas carols. And then each little family kind of came up with their own little skit. The first year we tried to put everybody together, and that ended up being a lot of headaches. So they went to having more of just a family-based performances. So each family would have their own little performance. We started out, having like a little nativity scene. Somebody's baby would be baby Jesus, and all the kids would either be animals or angels or shepherds. And then I remember the last year that we participated, we actually came to understand that William Branham was a false prophet on Labor Day. And we had already signed up for the Christmas program, which was going to be like the 1st of December. And I was bound and determined we were following through with this Christmas program. I already had everything prepared. I knew what my kids were doing. I don't remember what my kids did, but it was something about Jesus. I know that. Anyway, this particular Christmas program, my brothers ended up walking out of, and they were message believers as far as I know, but it became so Branham oriented. Everything was about William Branham. And not only that, it was about Joseph Branham. And Joseph Branham was present, and he sort of led the kids in, I don't know, like cheering or something. It's really hard to remember exactly what it was, but it's like he went up to the front and sort of raised his hands, and the kids like kind of cheered, and then he would lower his hands and they would quiet down, and he turned around to the parents and says, "Now, don't you wish they listened to you as much as they listened to me?" And that is classic Joseph Branham. He is very much about influence and control and his ability to lead people. So my brothers walked out because of that demonstration of his egotism, if you will, in the message. And I'm sure I've looked at pictures from like their graduations and so forth, and they have just become more and more like, I know Sylvia Perkins talks about her mom having a Christmas display that was all about the 7 church age messengers or the stature of a perfect man or something. And that's kind of the types of decorations that they have in these graduations and so forth. And I think from the outside looking in, it just looks as if it's getting worse and worse, or maybe more and more Branham centric is a less judgmental way to describe it.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it is. I agree. Emily, you never had the experience of being an adult and being in the high control group. So that's kind of cool. It's like you and Kristi have the reverse experiences, right? You had the childhood as the full-fledged high control group follower, and Kristi had the mainstream childhood, and then you swapped, right? Because Kristi became part of the high control group as an adult, and you, becoming an adult, decided that was not for you. So maybe this would be a good place to go to what it is like as an ex-message person trying to navigate the holidays, because this is something I think that is where the rubber hits the road, and everyone listening to this podcast is probably interested to know, how in the world do we navigate this weird holiday experience with relatives who are still in this high control group? How in the world can we try to preserve or build relationships maybe that weren't there? How can we, those of us who think Christ is the center of Christmas and want that to be prevalent, how do we be a witness to people who think we're pagans? It's really confusing, but I think we can probably pull out some good wisdom and some thoughts and some experiences that might be helpful to our listeners. So what you got for us, Emily?
Well, I think my adulthood out of the high control group in Christmas kind of has 2 parts. The first part is kind of coming out. I have a Christmas ornament from a friend that says, "My first Christmas, 2001. And I was 20 at that time, and she hand painted me this little blue mitten, and then it had that written on the back, and then she gave me a small little Christmas tree so I could put that. I was still living at home with my parents, so I put that in my room and had little battery operated little Christmas lights on it. So I had my heathen, what do they call that? A heathen, a pagan tree, a heathen something that you worship. What is that called? I don't remember. It's been so long. But, anyway, so I had that in my room. And then going over to the neighbors, having Christmas over there. Actually, my neighbors passed away a number of years ago, and I'm good friends with their son and daughter-in-law. And they gave me their fake Christmas tree. That was the very first Christmas tree that I got to decorate and learn how to decorate, because my friend's mom showed me, and we put the ornaments on, and we put all the lights on and the little garland and stuff. And she was super into Christmas and started to learn Christmas songs with her. Still years later, everybody in church, a Christmas carol comes on and everybody's singing at the top of their lungs, no words needed. And I'm sitting there going, yep, I don't know the words to this song. I didn't memorize it. But Christmas, I always had friends that were super gracious, come enjoy Christmas with us, come be part of our family, that invite us over. And it always seemed a little awkward to me, and I could never really put my finger on why. And then when I was in my 30s, I think it was, when I went to counseling, we finally kind of nailed it down. And Christmas, a lot of times, just listening to you guys tell the stories, especially Kristi retelling childhood memories, there's a lot of nostalgia in Christmas, and that's what it's about, and reliving those memories and building on those memories. And my counselor said, you have Christmas nostalgia, it's just negative Christmas nostalgia. So you have to process and work through that. So I did that. And now I love Christmas, and it was fun being overseas and learning some of the different Christmas traditions from friends, over in different European countries, and even the Christmas traditions living in Africa. The whole country just about shuts down for 2 weeks. Everybody leaves the city. They go out to the village. They take food and presents out to any of their family members that are still in the village. Everybody comes together. They have this time to rest and renew and just enjoy family. And, it was interesting for me just stopping and going, this isn't a pagan holiday. Oh, Christmas tree is a pagan idol. That's what a Christmas tree is. I couldn't remember the idol word, because apparently you're worshiping the Christmas tree. But just really, really interesting to me to have a chance to just stop and reflect and think about Christ's birth and what that meant, and enjoy time with friends and family. And, never had a chance to really do the Christmas cookies and stuff when I was younger. Did a few times with my grandma's, and that was one of the core memories I had of my grandma who had just passed away. And I haven't seen them yet, but my dad got some of her Christmas cookie cutters, I think. So I get to have a few of those. But yeah, it's just it's so different looking at it from the other side. It's not what you're taught that it is in the high control group, much like Kristi saying, as an adult, she's hearing all this stuff and kids are being lied to and they're going to be confused. And didn't the prophet say, if you lie to them about Santa Claus, they're not going to believe Jesus is real later on down the road and all this stuff. And that's just not true and not what Christmas is to be. So, and it was funny, Jen, when you were talking about the homeschool group doing the Christmas play or pageant or whatever. I was in a homeschool group when I was younger. I was the only kid in our high control group that was homeschooled. I was homeschooled before it was cool to be homeschooled up here. I think it was probably partially because the pastor's wife was a former school teacher, so there was that bias that not being in public school was somehow less than. But I was removed by my mother from the homeschool group because they did too much Christmas activities, and that was just going to corrupt me in the homeschool group. So here I am, a homeschooled kid at a homeschool group, and it's still a little bit too corrupt for me. So now I've had a chance. Yeah, my friends, when I was overseas, their relatives weren't around. This is where I looped around with the Christmas cookies and got distracted by something else. I love to have kids over and my friends' kids, and I get to be their auntie, and we get to make Christmas cookies and make a giant mess. And then when I was overseas, I'd figure out a way to like get some American macaroni and cheese or something, and we'd have a fun kids junk food meal, and then watch a Christmas movie like Elf or something like that, you know. So that was always that was a good time and good memories, and kind of excited to see what Christmas brings this year. I haven't had a chance to talk to my friend, the same friend that I got the Christmas tree from their mother. Their kids don't really have relatives that are around and doing stuff. So for the past number of years, their kids have come over and we've done Christmas cookies and hung out and watched a movie. So yeah, just it's a special time, and the first time you get I got a real Christmas tree when I moved into my house here, because I'd only had fake Christmas trees before, and I was slightly disappointed on how it didn't smell like a Christmas tree. So now I just stick with my fake Christmas tree and spray Christmas tree smelling stuff on it, and it's easier that way and cheaper. So yeah, excited to have this is going to be my first Christmas where I'm married. So that'll be a fun new thing too. So yeah, it's just
mistletoe.
I gotta get a mistletoe. Yes, I can hang it. I can get one of those command strips and hang it up in my archway here.
Now, as the heathen Jeffersonville high control group people that we always had mistletoe. We hung mistletoe. Yeah, lots of kissing. And we turned it into a family thing. Like, you know, if your kid is walking under the mistletoe, you know, they got to give you hugs and kisses, you know. So it's fun. There's less of that now that they're as tall as I am. But it's still fun. We still put up the mistletoe every year. So, of course...
But just don't kiss on the lips, because those are the sex glands, you know.
That's right. That's right. Don't kiss before you're married, or you'll have to marry that person or be single the rest of your life. Oh, my goodness.
Anyway, I digress.
That's getting more into the topic we didn't do this week.
Right? You believed what? Hey, that's coming coming next time.
That'll be our kickoff for the second season. And we haven't talked about that, but this is a fact. This is our last episode of our first season. We're going to go on a little hiatus because everybody deserves a break around Christmas and New Year's. I picked a really good company to work for. Our board of directors decided that all of us who work full-time deserve to have the time off between Christmas and New Year's with pay. I am so excited. I think that's just fabulous and awesome. So yes, we gave them all a big thank you. We're so thankful to those who made that decision. But yeah, it's kind of nice because I hadn't had a whole week off since spring break. So it's time for some time off. But anyway, well, navigating Christmas with family members who are still in the high control group. I think my dad gave up after I got married. You know, he was no longer responsible for me and whether I decorated my house or what I did for Christmas. I haven't heard a word from him since I got married about Christmas trees being heathen or wrong or anything Christmassy. Being bad. I haven't heard any of that. So that's a long time ago because I've been married for 29 years. So I haven't heard any of that stuff. I don't know. I know my mom would love to have a Christmas tree, does not have a Christmas tree in her home because of my dad, because he doesn't believe in having one. So I guess, and that's another topic that we don't have to, you and I, Kristi and Emily and I don't have to navigate this, but I'm sure there are people listening to us who are having to navigate what it's like to celebrate Christmas as a person who is not a believer in a high control group, who's living with someone who is a believer in a high control group. So that's something my mom has to navigate all the time. You know, she still does not cut her hair because her husband would not approve of that, and he wouldn't be happy if she cut her hair. So she doesn't cut her hair. Even though she doesn't think there's anything wrong with it or believe there's anything wrong with it, for the sake of her marriage and their happiness together, she doesn't. And the same way with having a Christmas tree, she doesn't. And so those are things, you know, you have to navigate in your own home. You have to determine, you know, I'm sure there are battles people choose, you know, like I know my mom paid tithes to the church that she went to that was not a high control group church, right? Because that was her money that she earned, and she did with it what she believed was right. And I'm sure that's not what my dad would have had her do. So that is a whole different topic, and probably a whole nother episode for next season, is, you know, what it's like to, and we'll probably have a guest or two, maybe a whole panel of people who are navigating what it's like to live in a marriage with someone you love who is still a member of a high control group. And I've had a really interesting journey with my extended family, because whenever I left my high control group, I think my youngest brother was the only person in my whole family and my husband's whole family, like our immediate families, the people we grew up with, who was not a message believer. And it was a secret. He did not tell anyone that he did not believe in the high control group. I found that out after I left. Oh yeah, no, I don't believe that. I just don't tell anybody I don't believe that. So they all know now, because he mostly wears shorts all the time. And that's not something you do in the high control group. If you're a guy, you don't run around wearing shorts all the time. But my brother does now. So he's, you know, it's not a secret anymore. Anyway, but we have been very blessed that my husband's brother, my brothers are no longer people who follow a high control group. And so that makes family get-togethers much less awkward because, you know, if there's one or two people who happen to be part of a high control group, they're not the people who determine what everybody else is doing, what everybody else is saying, what everybody else is thinking about. The conversation is a lot more balanced. Even though we don't, it's not like we get together and have Branham bashing sessions in front of the people who believe in him. We don't do that. But we also don't have to listen to his prophecies being recited over and over, and the implications for world events that like we used to have to hear over and over ad nauseum. So anyway, that's been my experience. I have just tried to be transparent and tried to be just real. I've just tried to show people who I am, where I am, let them see how I'm growing as I've made, different changes. I remember when my niece said, after I cut bangs, so I had bangs for a few years, and the first time she walked up to me and saw me, she goes, "Huh, Aunt Jen, I never even noticed your hair." And I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, I got my hair done." And she's not a message follower anymore. So it's been nice to have the numbers of those who are not in bondage kind of grow. But anyway, how about you, Kristi? Do you still have to navigate life around relatives who are in the high control group? And do you have any ideas about that or stories about that?
Well, mine is a little bit of a unique situation, I guess. We do not have contact. We have relatives that are still in a high control group, but outside of my mother-in-law, we have zero contact with any of them. That is 100% their choice. But that's been that way since right after we left. Everyone from the high control group that we knew kind of shunned us, and we don't have contact with them unless they too have left. So there were some people that we knew we were close with. We were went through a period of distance. They ended up leaving the high control group, and we've reconnected since. But for the most part, we didn't have to navigate that. We actually had the opposite problem. We had this abyss of nothingness in terms of traditions and things to do with our families. We had to go back to square one and figure out, what do we do during the holiday season, right? Because we used to have like things going on, like parties, get-togethers with other message families during the holidays, or we would exchange gifts with our friends. We actually, when we left the message, we were living almost 2,000 miles away from our families because we had moved across country away from them, and we're going to another message church there. So we didn't have anything. And then all of a sudden we left this high control group that taught these very specific things about Christmas, and about how Christmas trees and Santa and all of this is pagan and not something you should do. We kind of had a nuanced view of that, whatever. But then you leave that and you have to go back and say, what if this was just wrong, bad teaching, bad theology? What if this is good Christian teaching? Because there are Christians that aren't in high control groups that agree that you shouldn't do Santa, right? So we had to go and figure out, what do we think about all of these things? And it's really, really hard and really confusing. And it's very loaded, especially going back to traditions that I had as a child that I decided weren't good. And then trying to re-embrace them in adulthood for my own children. That's just a very messy process. And every year has been a little bit different. We haven't really settled into, this is what our family traditions are. We have some. We give gifts to our children. We love to decorate a Christmas tree. I'm not a baker really, but I do try and make some things around the holiday season with my kids and for my kids. So yeah, we just are still trying to navigate that. From my childhood, I really enjoyed Christmas Eve service. It was just something kind of beautiful and magical tradition. This is the first year where I'm saying to myself and to my family, like, that's something that I would want to try and do. Up to this point, I haven't been going to any kind of Christian assembly even during the holidays, and now I really do want to re-embrace that. I think it's a beautiful tradition to go and think about the historic holiday and be with other people who celebrate Christmas and want to remember the reason for the season and think about Jesus' birth during that time. But yeah, it was a long process to get back to finding any joy in that. And part of it had to do with being in a high control group and having all of that kind of poisoned. But looking forward to it this year, and moving forward, I think it's going to become even easier to find joy in all of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you, Kristi. I have recently made a church change, and the new church where I'm attending, they have 3 Christmas events. One of them was yesterday. I didn't end up getting to go. We had a family complication that stopped us. They had Deck the Halls at 4 o'clock, and then Candles and Carols at 6 o'clock. And then this coming up Sunday is going to be Jingle Jam, which is going to be family worship. So all the kids who are usually in kids' church are going to come, and they're probably performing something, I would imagine. And then they're going to have a feast. Everyone with the letters A to M is supposed to bring a side dish, and then from N to Z is supposed to bring a dessert. And they're furnishing, I think, ham and turkey and potatoes and stuffing, but that just sounds super magical to me. And then the 22nd, I think they're going to have a candlelight Christmas Eve type of thing. So I'm excited. It's a little overwhelming because we were at a Methodist church for a long time, and it was pretty laid back and chill. They did do a Christmas Eve service, but there was nothing huge like is planned at this church, which is not a huge church that we're going to, but Christmas is huge there, and I'm kind of excited about that. I do want to let you know that you're not alone, Kristi, in losing family connections on leaving the high control group. That happened on my husband's side of the family. He was blessed that his brother did also leave the high control group, but for the most part, his family is no contact, or if there is contact, it's some sort of manipulative guilt trip contact. So there's just not a whole lot. There's a, like you said, a huge abyss where there used to be, family gatherings and celebrations and phone calls. That's just gone. So, and there are probably a lot of people listening to this podcast who are in similar situations. So, as Kristi said, it will get better, and it's going to continue to get better the longer that you're away, and you can make your own celebration and your own tradition. What wisdom do you have to add to that, Emily? And we're actually kind of running low on time, but I think we've covered the topic super well.
I'll keep it short, but just thinking about navigating now that you're out navigating relatives that are still in the high control group. It was interesting that my parents ended up transitioning from the group where I was raised to a different pastor, and I knew that he celebrated Christmas to some extent because he married a gal from Ohio who did come from a Christmas celebrating group, so it was kind of a tension for them before they ended up leaving that assembly. But I was always the one then that kind of knew what they would like, and so I started buying Christmas presents for my parents, and because of the type of people they are, they never said no. So they'd accept the Christmas presents and be happy for the Christmas presents, but for quite a number of years, they have strategically now taken a week away. There's a condo somewhere in the state where they can get cheap time in it, and they leave for the entire Christmas week. So this year they're gone from the 28th or the 21st to the 28th, and I get to hold down the fort for them, and they just vanish over Christmas. So it's very easy that I can do then my Christmas activities with my friends, and that have kind of become family, and now we have Pete in the mix. So yeah, I don't really have to do a whole lot because they just vanish for the holidays, so that makes that a little less awkward, I guess. But wisdom, I don't know, it was interesting when you were talking about the perspective we don't have, and it'd be interesting if someone in the comments would kind of let us know if you're bold enough or able to safely, if you are in a situation where you're someone who doesn't celebrate Christmas with someone who's still in the high control group that does celebrate, or you do celebrate and they don't, and you're not in the group and they are in the group. Whatever, it's getting late. It was a long day at work, and it's been a long weekend. But anyway, that was a very interesting perspective, because thinking about my cousin's wife who is not in the high control group, and my cousin is in the high control group because he got back in after they were married. I wonder, I should reach out to her. I wonder what she does over the holidays, or does he now maybe celebrate a little bit, even though we were super anti-Christmas? I don't know. So, my wisdom is kind of part of my journey. Just explore Christmas. Don't be afraid of it. Maybe there's certain traditions you'll like. Maybe there's certain traditions you don't like. Ask questions. I think about the fact they're like, Christmas isn't real. Jesus wasn't born at that time, and he was born in the spring, like when lambs were born. Well, you know what? I sat through a Bible study once, and the guy made a very convincing argument based on scripture. And what was Zechariah, John's dad, because of the order in the priesthood he was in, and the rotation, and the time period that John the Baptist was born, and how far along that Mary was and some of the planetary alignments, there's actually kind of a really good case that I believe that Jesus was probably born more around September or October in the fall and wasn't born in the spring. That was like completely mind-blowing when I stumbled across that. So take everything you think you know, ask questions, have fun, explore. I have not spontaneously combusted, and I've enjoyed exploring Christmas. So sometimes it's terrifying and you think you may spontaneously combust when you do something that you've been told over and over and over again is so heathen, but we're here, we're sitting upright and looking forward to Christmas coming and hoping that you can find some joy in the season too.
That's great. Emily, you also reminded me of some things in the Christmas story and the story of Mary and Elizabeth that we believe that were absolutely false and had no basis in Scripture. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those out there just because if you happened to be in our particular high control group, you may not know that these things are false. And you feel free to research this and find out. But first of all, John the Baptist was never said to be dead in his mother's womb. He did jump in his mother's womb. He was the first to recognize that even in the womb that Jesus was the Messiah. When he heard the name of Jesus, he did jump in his mother's womb. But also another thing that is not true is that we believed that Mary was not related to Jesus, which I'm not sure why we thought that her genealogy was in the Bible. Why would it be important who she was if she was not related to Jesus? But Mary was indeed related to Jesus. Of course, Joseph wasn't related to Jesus because Jesus was the son of the Most High God. But so those are things that you can put away and realize that that's not true. It's not true that John the Baptist was dead in his mother's womb, and it's not true that Jesus wasn't related to Mary, his mother, because he was definitely the kinsman redeemer, and he was descended from David on his mother's side. So, yeah, she really was. She really did carry. She really was her egg that was made to be the Son of God, and that is just mind-blowing to me. I just love it. It's the story of Christmas. It's God coming down to be with us, and it just gives me goosebumps all the time. So anyway, with all that, we will not sing for you because we haven't practiced, but you can feel free to go put on your favorite Christmas carol. Away in a Manger, Silent Night, A Little Town of Bethlehem, O Come Emmanuel, whatever you want, whatever you love. Put it on, listen to it, enjoy it, sing it for the rest of the month. You're bursting, Emily. What you got?
I am. A great Christmas tradition from overseas, Boney M. Look up the group Boney M. They have some great Christmas songs. You knew it was Christmas in Uganda when Boney M came on, and my friend who's from South Africa, the first time I said, "Who's Boney M?" it was like I was saying, "Who's Elvis?" to somebody in the States. It was like, how can you not know Boney M? They're synonymous with Christmas. So I now own the Boney M album, and Pete absolutely hates it. I think they were like a German group of Jamaicans with a South African twist, and I don't know. It's just chaotic, amazing music, and yeah. When you're talking about Christmas music, I'm like, oh, I gotta go get my Boney M album out.
Well, anyone who loves music is gonna love Christmas music, from my perspective, anyway. We hope that you have a wonderful, blessed Christmas season, and we hope that you enjoy your break, because if you've been listening to all of our podcasts, you know that this is the last one we're going to make for a while. We're going to take a little break. We'll come back sometime after the first of the year, and we will try to continue to release one on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. And thank you for listening. We hope you found our show informative and helpful. Feel free to contact us at movingforwardtalkshow.com with any questions or ideas for future shows. We look forward to hearing from you as we continue to demonstrate that life goes on and healing happens as long as you keep moving forward.